Sup kids, it's me Motes. We just got done playing through the Resident Evil HD remake, and now it's time to play Classic or Plastic. We're going to rate the game in 3 categories: gameplay, storytelling, and the overall legacy of the game, with each category eligible for up to 3 stars. Then, we'll award 1 final star if we feel like the game has the X factor. If a game gets 8 out of 10 stars, we'll give it that coveted classic status. So, now that we know the rules, let's go ahead and jump into the review. Resident Evil was first released in 1996, and while not the first survival game ever made, it quickly defined itself and popularized an entirely new genre, survival horror. It was a complete global hit, and eventually led to further survivor horror games within the franchise, including Resident Evil 2 in 1998, along with Resident Evil 3 Nemesis in 1999. These games defined Resident Evil as a genre, and I think it's safe to say without them, survival horror wouldn't be what it is today. But we didn't play the original Resident Evil. We played the Resident Evil HD remake. In 2002, Capcom released the Resident Evil remake exclusively for the Nintendo GameCube. However, this remake was not a simple port to a new system. The team rebuilt every environment, doubled down on tension and lighting, and improved character models, along with adding new enemy types, aka the Speedy Gonzales. It wasn't just RE but prettier. It was a scarier version of Resident Evil. 13 years later, Capcom returned to the GameCube remake and released the HD remaster for modern systems. And this release was far more important than what it looked like on the surface, but not for the reasons you would think. While its main function was to bring the remake to the masses by making it accessible on PlayStation, Xbox, PC, and later even Switch, more importantly, it redirected the vision of Capcom for what a Resident Evil game should be. What you have to understand is that the few games leading up to the re-release in 2013 had a very different feel than the original Resident Evil game. The change in philosophy, focusing more on action over horror, really started with Resident Evil 4 in 2005, which was a smash success. And then that continued with the less enthusiastic release of Resident Evil 5 in 2009 and Resident Evil 6 in 2012. For many fans at this point, they felt as though the franchise was having a little bit of an identity crisis. Was Resident Evil a horror franchise or an action shooter? When the 2013 re-release of the Resident Evil HD version became one of Capcom's best-selling digital titles of the time, it really showcased that people still deeply wanted that classic survival horror. Its success directly influenced greenlighting Resident Evil 2 Remake, along with committing the up-and-coming Resident Evil 7 to a first-person horror game instead of the action games typical of the last few releases. Because of that, I think it's an easy 3 stars for Legacy. Let's talk gameplay. I think that the gameplay in this game was very good, but it's not perfect. From a controls perspective, I think that the game holds up pretty well, especially for the remake being from 2013. The tank controls work very well in a mouse and keyboard setup, and the game allows you to switch between a more typical control style if you're on controller, so no complaints from me here. This game does such a great job with horror in general. The idea of utilizing resource management as a mechanism to create horror is so compelling, and we see it in games that are made today. This idea that, you want to go ahead and kill this zombie? Go ahead. But who knows? You might want that ammo later. You want to go ahead and lug around 3 guns just in case you see something really bad? That's great. Go ahead, do that. But what happens if you find a gem you really need? And I think that this creates a tension that allows the game to feel important. Every decision feels important, whether you're just taking items from the box in the inventory or you're trying to decide if you're going to run past an enemy or not. And that's so well done. My biggest gripe is honestly just a continuation of the idea of using resources to create a horror atmosphere. And that was, for me, just how little saves there were. Just the idea of having saving as a resource in a game where running back and doing something that you've already done is incredibly uninteresting was the worst part of the game. And I found myself concerned of dying because I didn't want to play a 15 or 20-minute segment that I'd already done and waste my time. And now, not only did I die in game, I'm dying of boredom because I'm having to do the same thing that I just did. And now I'm going to do it again. So honestly, just because of the issues with the saving, I think I would only give this game a 2 out of 3 stars when it comes to gameplay. Now, talking about the story of this game, I think the story is incredibly okay. Thinking about just the beginning of the game and Act 1, you and your buddies are trapped in this haunted mansion and it's like, get out. And then you find out that, oh, there are some secret experiments being done and they're making zombies. Not the most clever plot or idea that's ever been told as far as story goes. But what I will say is that as you continue to push through in the game, some of the characters become deeply compelling. And I think that for me personally, the story of Barry really drives the entire plot home for me. The entire game, I didn't know if this was someone who I could trust because the game does a really good job of making him seem suspicious. But at the same time, there are all of these moments in the game where he could have let you just hang high and dry, and he's constantly saving you. And it makes you feel like, well, why is he saving me if he is on the other team? But then why is he doing this creepy thing if he's on my team? When I was given the option to trust him or not in the middle of one of the last battles of the game, I honestly didn't know what option to pick. And I think that could have fallen really flat, except that at the end when they explain that, well, his wife and his kids, they got a gun to his head. And so he's having this internal conflict, scene by scene, trying to figure out whose side he's going to be on. It all made sense in a really gratifying way that, for me, was personally really surprising. It wouldn't be a Resident Evil review if we didn't talk about the voice acting.
Jill, no. But it's not necessary to destroy stars.
Barry.
That was a close one. A second late, you would have fit nicely into a sandwich.
I guess all I could say is that I was shocked that this wasn't fixed in between the 2002 re-release and the 2013 re-release. Personally, I thought it was really funny. It was so bad it had me laughing all the time. It just seemed so low budget. It was good for all the wrong reasons. Again, shocking to me, but to be fair, kind of the corny humor associated with voice acting goes on to become a staple of this franchise. So I think I'm relatively indifferent about it. All in all, I think that I would give the story and the production of the story 2 out of 3 stars as well. Let's talk X Factor. I think that when we think about the overall legacy of what Resident Evil was to horror gaming, and then how the 2013 re-release remodeled the entire philosophy on what we would see from the Resident Evil franchise, this game has redefined what horror looks like. And I don't think that horror today would be the same without it. And so for me, it's an easy yes. This game has the X factor. I think that it deserves the star there. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why I personally think that the Resident Evil HD is a certified classic. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.